Hello. On behalf of the Historical Society of Harford County, welcome to this afternoon's presentation, The Ma and Pa Railroad, 1909 to 1999. Before we begin, please be aware that this event is being recorded and will be made available publicly through the Historical Society webpage and on the Society's YouTube channel. The Historical Society of Harford County collects, preserves, promotes, and interprets the rich and diverse history of the Harford County region, from its prehistoric origins to the present, for the education and enjoyment of current and future generations. The Society operates its headquarters at 143 North Main Street and the Hayes House Museum. Both are located in Bel Air, Maryland. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Society buildings are closed to the public, and we are holding all events virtually. I am Chris Potts, your host for today's presentation, and our speaker is Walter Holloway. Walt is the current vice president of the Ma and Pa Historical Society and the resident Ma and Pa Railroad historian here at the Harford County Historical Society, where he also serves as assistant chair of archives. Walt's knowledge of the Ma and Pa is extensive, and his connection to the railroad lifelong and personal. His grandfather was a station master with the railroad, and Walt's first childhood home was the Bel Air station. So without further delay, welcome, Walt. We are delighted to have you with us and eager to hop on board. So take it away.
Hello, everyone. Today is an anniversary. The Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad was merged between the Baltimore and Lehigh Railroad and the York Southern Railroad, signed agreement to merge and create the Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad on February 13th and 14th of 1901. We're starting the presentation of the 100 years of the Ma and Pa Railroad. What I have here is the agreement, which is dated January 31st, 1901, between the York Southern Railroad and the Baltimore and Lehigh Railway to merge and create the Ma and Pa Railroad. The agreement was written, and each board went over the agreement, and on February 13th, the Baltimore and Lehigh Board of Directors signed the agreement. On February 14th, the York Southern Railroad signed the agreement, creating the Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad. So that was the beginning of the railroad. Now, I have the first issued timetable, which was dated in April of 1901. The railroad at that time, there were 12 daily passenger trains. There were 2 daily freight trains, but because of the Pennsylvania Dutch, there were restrictions on running trains, especially passenger trains, on Sundays. But there were 6 passenger trains run on Sunday. 3 of them from York to Baltimore, 3 of them from Baltimore to York, not York, Delta. So they operated that way for a few years. On the back of the timetables was a list of surgeons, and the railroad had contacted different doctors and where they were located so that the train crews, if they had a medical emergency, knew what doctors in what communities would be available to take care of any problems that the train crews had on their trains. Now then, with the merger, there were so many pieces of equipment. The York Southern brought 3 engines, and they were renumbered 1, 2, and 3 that were standard gauge, and they were used. They also brought 6 coaches, 12 box cars, 2 stock cars, 10 flat cars. What was called coal cars now are called gondolas. There were 7 of those, and they had 2 service calls. The Baltimore and Lehigh had 3 engines also that they brought, and that was number 20, 21, and 22 that were brought. And those 3 engines had been purchased secondhand from the Baltimore, well, Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad. But the railroad also leased 4 older engines from the B&O for them to have enough equipment to function while they were ordering new equipment. And the Baltimore and Lehigh brought 7 coaches, 6 baggage, 59 box, 2 stock, 10 flats, 8 coal cars, 3 service cars, and 1 caboose that made up the equipment that the railroad ended up with after the merger in 1901. Now, over the next 30 years, they bought more engines, freight cars, starting in 1901, 1902. Now, I want to go over the different stations. Now, this is a picture of the Oak Street Station, which was in Baltimore. It was built in 1887. To the right of the picture, you see some people standing. That is North Avenue, which was built across the Jones Falls Valley in 1895. This station was torn down in 1937 for the city to build Howard Street across the Jones Falls. And so they had to remove this building, and the railroad built another wooden station down underneath North Avenue. And I want to mention the stone on this building was quarried at the Rocks in Harford County in the quarry that the railroad owned. Now we're going to go and travel north towards York, and the equipment that we talked about came, and this is a 1909. So this is 9 years later after the merger, and it shows all the equipment, which was 178 pieces of equipment in freight service and 25 pieces of equipment in passenger service. It also lists the engines that they had. And I say every year, the company would send in their information to a publisher that listed every railroad in the country, how much equipment they had, and any special things that needed to be known about the railroad. Now we're Cold Spring Lane in Baltimore, Evergreen. There was no actual station building. There was just a little platform. And if somebody wanted to get on or off the train, getting off the train, they'd notify the conductor, who would tell the train to stop. Or if you were standing on the platform and wanted to be picked up, you just wave your hand at the engineer and he would stop, pick you up. Now in the 1910, well, goes back to before like 1905, 1904, the railroad would run special excursions. People would contact and rent a train. This one here, 1913, was by the up in York, that they were going to run a special excursion to Baltimore. The railroad would offer excursions to Fenmore out in Western Maryland with the Western Maryland Railroad. They would bring people down, transfer them over to the Western Maryland Railroad, take them out to Fenmore. They would also have special excursions to Rock Hall over on the Eastern Shore. They would bring people down, they would get on the ferry, and they would take them over to the beaches over on the Eastern Shore for a day. Bring them back home. Church groups would have their camps, church camps at different places along the line. And they would arrange with the railroad to run a special train to take them to these different events. The first pictures we have of any of the events would be the teachers organization that went to Loch Raven. They had two places along the line. First was at Loch Raven, where the reservoir, they had a picnic ground that they would take people out to on Saturdays. Also, the Rocks was another place that they would use. And later on, up in York County, the swimming club that was along the railroad, they would run special trips to that. Now this is Winehurst Avenue. You can see a milk stand there and a platform. Before the merger, in the building there, which is still standing, a room was rented for people to wait for the trains. But by 1901, you just stood along the tracks and they would stop and pick you up. At one time, the Notre Dame school and the nuns, they had put a little gazebo along the tracks that people could wait in the gazebo. This picture is about 1932. Homeland. This was the station, and this building is still standing, and it is a private home. And it is, but it was pretty much abandoned as a agency by 1901 to, and actually one of the employees rented the house to live in. And we go on up the road to the next station. We're just crossed over Charles Street, and you can see the platform and the building, which was the second station at Woodbrook. The building on the right-hand side, which at this time was a little freight house, was the original station at this location. And you can barely see in the center, the tracks is an overhead bridge, which a road crossed over the railroad tracks. And we go on up the tracks, and we have Sheppard. Sheppard was another little flag stop. You can see the siding going off to the left, which went up to the mental hospital. They had a coal-fired furnaces to keep the buildings heated, and so they received coal cars. And the platform there is where you say, and in these platforms that you see, they used to have a green flag attached to the side wall. And if you wanted to catch the train, you just picked up the flag and stood out there and waved it at the conductor, and they would stop and pick you up. And we go on. Towson. This is the second station at Towson. It is no longer standing. It was torn down. And it was expanded twice. Now, the building that you see behind the station on the left is still standing. The area where the station, everything, Susquehanna Avenue, is just out of the picture to the right, is now all parking lot for businesses in the area. And just beyond the station, once you cross Susquehanna Avenue, about 100 yards, was the bridge over York Road. Now, the only thing, they finally took that down in the late 50s, 58, 59. But the abutment, stone abutment on the south side of York Road is still standing and has a plaque. And that whole area now is being rebuilt as Towson Row. Now, on up the street, just before you get to Joppa Road, we had Towson Heights. And you had just passed, by the time you got to Towson Heights, you had just passed Black & Decker and Company. And you can see the little station and then the freight shed that was there. Then you would go just beyond to the left there, you would cross Joppa Road. Now, for all of you in the Baltimore area, if you know where Goucher Boulevard is and Joppa Road, Joppa Road used to be a big hill. And After the railroad pulled out in 58, they started filling that whole area in and leveled it all and built Goucher Boulevard in there. Because on the other side, you had Towson Estates, which after it crossed a trestle from the Heights to the Estates, to the right of the Estates is a hill going up, and there are all kinds of housing built there. And we're going on down the road to Oakleigh, another small station. This one had a agent. It's enclosed. And here's Loch Raven, another station with an agent. And this is a group, an excursion group that had come to the Waterworks, which is in the background, where they had the parties and the dancing. So this is that area. Maryland School. There's an interesting story, another little shed. You can see between the engine and the shed, you can see a railing. Now, Maryland School, it was Maryland School. It was for the bad boys, the children that got in trouble. This was where they were brought and kept. The last name, and I don't think it's there anymore, was Hickey School. And that was where all the juvenile delinquents ended up. They used to run a Sunday train to bring the parents of these kids from the city out, would drop them off here for the school so they could visit their children. The train went on to Bel Air, would be turned on the Y there, and wait until the afternoon. And the train went out about 9 o'clock in the morning and then came back about 3 o'clock in the afternoon to pick the parents up and bring them back to Baltimore. The next little stop is Somerville. Just a little shot here. There was very little traffic. The main thing you had here, you had a siding going off from here, which actually was the siding that took supplies into the construction people building the dams on Loch Raven. The dam was originally built, the lower dam, in 1914. Around 1918, they expanded the dam. In 1922, they expanded to what is there today. So they had their own little railroad back, and we had a siding there with a track where the railroad would put supplies, and then they had their own little locomotive that would take the rail cars to the actual construction site. Knott's Cliff. And Knott's Cliff Road is right past, you're looking northbound, right past the station here. And it was put in, the Catholic Church had a retirement home on the left-hand side across and up a hill, on top of a hill to the left, where the nuns could come down, get on the train to go wherever, or from the different churches, they could come out and visit friends out here. Now, Glenview, this station The roof's gone, but it's made of cement. It was built between 1901 and 1905. And you can see the hill on the right. Up on top of the hill, XF Hoofer, who's in Glenarm, was building a large hotel. And he was building the hotel, and he built this little station, but it was never on any of the timetables, and the hotel never opened because just before it was finished, the hotel burned. But this station was there and still there. Glenarm. Glenarm, the station you see there is the third station in Glenarm. The first station was a wooden station. The second station was inside the Hooper complex, which is right across the street, the road here to your right. This station was originally built in Baldwin, which is a couple miles down the north on the tracks. When the station at Glenarm burned, they decided they picked up the station in Baldwin, put it on a flat car, and moved it down and set it down here in Baldwin. And that station is still standing. The family that owns it sold it last year to another gentleman who has gotten historic preservation for the building and is in the process of fixing the building up. We're not sure what is going to be in the building. In recent years, it was a pizza shop. But as I said, new equipment. This picture is after 1949 because number 80 was the second diesel engine that the railroad bought, and that was in 1948. Long Green building no longer exists. This was the second station at Long Green. The first was a small building, which you see the warehouse down from it, and behind that was the original station, got moved out of the way. The head of maintenance, track work, after the railroad finished running trains in Maryland in 58, he was able to buy the station and he made it his home. Hyde. The big thing in Hyde was the Egyptian corn canning house. This building is still standing. At the time the railroad came through, it was the post office, it was a store, and the store owners lived on the second floor. The post office to the left of the building built a small operation that they have their post office, and the building has been used as a dog clinic, dress shop, but it's still standing there at Hyde on Hyde Road. Now, Baldwin, that's the agent standing there. And the building in the background on the right was the first station at Baldwin. And it was a store at the time. That house and barn are still standing at Baldwin Road. The station, after I say they built one on the platform that the man's standing on, to the left, they had built a wooden station, moved it to Glenarm, and then built another one. And it stayed around until it was 62 or 63, it burned down. Laural Brook, you're now in Harford County. The gunpowder is straight ahead, down the track, south of the track. This is the second station at Laural Brook. The first one was an enclosed one with an agent, but it got old. They tore it down and put this one up. It lasted 55, 56. It was blown up. Two teenagers stole some milk cans and took and put some dynamite in one of the milk cans, put it inside the shed there, lit it off, blew the thing to bits. They turned around a couple days later, and where the milk cans had been stolen up the road, the second milk can turned up again. But this building had been destroyed. Fallston, the next station. Now, looking from this angle at the station, the porch roof is gone. Is now a design company in there. It's hard to tell the building, what you see in front of you right now, to what was is there now. But that building is still standing. To the behind this building is a large area that was built on. There was a flooring company in there for many years. And another thing about this photograph, if you look to the right, you see a two-story building. That's a store, and Penn Supreme ice cream they sell. You can see the sign there. In 1926, Maurice and Simon Klein, who has the Klein grocery store empire here in Harford County, they came down from Lancaster and bought that business. And they operated that store until 1945, when Maurice's son, Ralph, went into the Army. They decided they were tired of operating, and so they sold the business. Though in 1947, 48, when Ralph came back from the Army, he wanted a business to run. So they went to the relatives of Tucker family and bought the grocery store and retail store in Forest Hill. And so from there, they built their empire that they have today. Vale. Now, this building is no longer standing. Last year, it had been abandoned for probably 10 years, overgrown. Some tramps have lived in it on and off, and the county finally condemned it, and company came in and took the whole building down. So that building is now gone. Bel Air. Looking north, the station, which was my first home. My grandfather, who had started with the railroad in 1905 in Forest Hill, 1931, he moved to Bel Air, took over the Bel Air operation. When I came along in 46, he let my mother and father and my sister, we lived in the upstairs. About a block away was another relative, and my grandfather and grandmother lived there until they died, and then we had to move out of the station for the new station agent, and we moved into that house with my great aunt. But this station was torn down. It's the original station that was built in Bel Air. The first few years until they built this station in 1887 was a passenger car that they used to sell tickets and everything. But it was around 1880, 82, they had a mold problem because the building was built flat on the ground with no real base to the thing, and water used to lie underneath and it was rotting out the thing. So they jacked the building up, put a new base under the building and set it back down. But after the railroad left in 58, there was on and on battles of what to do with the building and the land. And it was finally arranged that Southern States would buy it. The building in 62 was torn down. So it was all taken apart. Bynum, the next station up the line. The right-hand side of the building is still standing. It's now a truck repair facility. The two-story house, which was the agent's living upstairs and store in the downstairs, another store owned by Tucker. Now, the warehouse you see to the left side there is no longer there, but that house and tree next to it are still there. If you turn down Melrose Lane, you'll see the house sitting there and the tall pine tree in the front of it. So the house was torn down in 59. An oil company came in, put dikes around, took the house part down, put tanks in for oil. Greer Oil was operating from there for a while. Forest Hill, the station's still standing. There have been changes to it. The freight doors you see to the right, it's window there. The little shed, which was the maintenance away crew, that's gone. The building on the left side of the gas electric engine there is still there. It's covered in aluminum siding now. That building, this building here was built, station in 1914. The original station was in the store itself, which was behind that warehouse, which burned on July 10th of 1914. The building that's standing there now, which was the agricultural agent for the state and the county, was built and opened. The store reopened new in October of 1914. The station was built and opened October 12th of 1914. And right now it houses a model train shop. All right. Sharon, the next trestle, the next station. You can still see here to the right a little bit of the ties from where the tracks went. This was a house. It was a station. And mainly there was a platform here that was used and a little freight house. And that was there until the railroad was completed. Fern Cliff. Fern Cliff was another little area of the county that used for enjoyment. The little road you see there is Fern Cliff Lane, which is still there, off of Rocks Road to your right. You have the shelter, and then you see in front platform, and that is where they would put the milk cans. And all the southern platforms ended up with the shelter on top to keep the sun off the milk cans so that the milk that were picked up every morning wouldn't spoil. Now, rocks. Now, to the right, just a bare, you see the Rock Station, the big building. In the early years in the narrow gauge area was the stilling, but that was Ramsey's Hotel, Conference Center, store. Ramsey also had a store at the base of the King and Queen seat, where there's a little parking lot that they used to sell sandwiches, gas, cigarettes, whatever. And there was a rope bridge that ran across from there to this building over Deer Creek. Now, it was 1957 that this big, by that time, it had become a rooming house, and it burnt down. All right, now we're at the next station, Minefield. And you can see the milk platform and the shelter. And this is the road crossing is Greer Nursery. The house that you see is still standing there. It's yellow. I don't believe the porch is still on it. but that house is still there. And past that house, when you're coming up Greer Nursery, you can see the flat area that where the tracks ran through. And at one time there was a large cannery that operated, and there was a siding for it here at Minefield. Now on to Street. Originally named Highland, but when the railroad started carrying mail, they had to change the name of this station because there was another Highland within the state of Maryland that had been there for a while. So they had to take and change the name. Now this building, part of it is still standing. About 2 years ago, it has been a private home. In December, and it was in December, November or December, the house burned. Did a lot of damage, but it's still standing, and they rebuilt it. But this was a store, a community center, there in Highland, but it was known as the Street Station, and you can see the freight house on the right side underneath the tree. Pylesville. All right, the southbound train. And here you have the station, and in the center you have the station and the freight house. Now it looks like one building, but actually there's a foot of space between the two buildings. They're two separate buildings. The train just beyond the telephone pole there will be crossing Broad Creek. And behind it, this is before 1927, the Western Maryland Creamery built a large plant here in Pylesville. At one time, there used to be a granary, a paper mill that operated here in Pylesville. Here we go to Whiteford. Half of this building is sitting in Fawn Grove. There's a Whiteford had a Southern States operation, Whiteford Packing, Miller Chemical. So it had a couple of large operations, and but had sat there till about 5 years ago. It was falling apart, and the one gentleman got control of the building, picked up half of it, the right half, and moved it to his property in Fawn Grove. But somebody got an injunction to keep him from moving the rest of the building, and eventually, by the time he got permission to actually move the building, it had rotted enough that it was unmovable, and so it was scrapped. All right, Cardiff. You are looking southbound. The road crossing before the building is Dooley Road. If you look at the building, and the first window on the right side, or it's a second window, I should say, is the Maryland line. So part of the building is in Pennsylvania, part of it is in Maryland. Robinson Brothers owned a building. At one time, it was a carriage factory. They did grain and they sold grain and other equipment. Talking to the grandsons of the people that ran the store, they used to get a lot of merchandise from Baltimore. The phone was in the front of the building in Pennsylvania. For them to call and order material from Baltimore, they had to pay long distance charges because they were out of state. So they had the local Harford County phone company come and install a phone in the back half of the building. So they were in Maryland. So they could call Baltimore and order their supplies, and there was no long distance charges. So yeah, that's how some people made their money. Now going up the road, we've made it to Pennsylvania. And this is the Delta Station. And the Delta Station, the second Delta Station, the first one is up the Peach Bottom branch. But this building burned in 1964. But the first one was about a half a mile up the road. And you had, before the companies merged, you had one side of tracks for the Baltimore and Lehigh, and the other side were York Southern rails. And they had to build a line so that they could run together. Now going up into Pennsylvania, this is Bryansville, the next station that was lined. The tracks were on the left-hand side there. And a lot of these stations, they have an agent for a while. Agent would quit. They wouldn't have an agent, then they get one hired. So they changed all the time. And depending on what was in the area to what kind of business they had. Another little station, Castlefin. In Maryland, there were a lot of agents that I talked about, and the little flag stops. In Pennsylvania, most of the stations were in private buildings. And what they had agents, and they were known as commercial agents. So whatever business that they got for the railroad, they got a percentage of it. But you can see a warehouse, the two-story stationary store, and to the right is a covered bridge. This is from a glass plate from around 1900. Now, Southside, there was no station, in which station stopped. This is a picture of a cannery that was at Southside that had a platform for people to stop the train to get on. Woodbine, private station, tracks coming through. There were a creamery and canning house here. This building is still standing as a private home. Bridgeton, long gone. Never had a lot of business, but out in the country. Muddy Creek Forks, still operating. The is now owned by the Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad Preservation Society. They operate the mill, the station. Now this station, it was a store. It was the phone company, the post office. So it had a lot of different things, and they're open during the summer, usually from May to October. I say the building's still there, and they have some Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad equipment there that they've been able to get. So it's a good place to visit, learn different things. Up the road, this is High Rock, next station. The store and station is no longer there. It had a big creamery here. Laurel, next station. In the front of the station here is where the tracks ran. Muddy Creek is just to the behind this building, and there's a bridge just to the right. There's an artisan who does woodworking and glass work that operates out of this building, which is still standing. Fenmore, another community up the road. It didn't have a real station, but it was an area. Brookville, this building was the station, house, store. It's still standing, and it, as a private home. They had a fire a few years back that destroyed part of the roof, and they rebuilt that part. Now talk about in the 30s, 40s. These are lists of fan trips that were organized by different groups. The BSME stands for the Baltimore Society of Model Engineers. Organized a bunch of trips. The National Railroad Historical Society organized trips coming out of Philadelphia. Martin Camera Club, C&P Telephone. There was Louis Beebe and a partner of his, Greg, organized a trip of New York well-to-dos that they ran from Baltimore to Delta. They had their own band that operated and kept everything going. Fenton, the building's still standing. It's a private home now. Another small community. Brownton, you can see the foundation for the building. It was a fire that destroyed the building back in the early 40s. So we've never found a picture of the building. Springvale, another home store. That was a station in Pennsylvania. That building is still standing. Red Line, the other big station, and that is now is also still standing. It is the Historical Society for Red Lion, is in that building, and they operate, and that's actually the second building that was built. The first one burned, and they rebuilt it exactly the same. Now, since the railroad left late in its time frame, you can see the Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad on top of the station. That had been there, not there, been there. That sign came and went 4 or 5 times. Dallastown, that was a what they called Dallastown Junction, had a switch to take this off to go to Dallastown, which is a suburb of York and Red Line. Yo, this was the station. And in the 60s, when some of the private groups were running train excursions, they ran the Delta for a number of years, for a couple of years, but the heavier engines couldn't go that far, so they would run them down here to Yo. The building off to the right used to be a cigar factory. Relay, another spot house, and it's still there. War Valley, the 2-tier balcony there, that house is gone. That was torn down about 4 years ago. Benroy, the building is still there. That was another small off of Cabin Mary Road. Enterprise was a platform. Now, they're talking, I put a ticket here so you could see a lot of these places were Enterprise, Paper Mill, Hollywood, Plank Road, Norwalk, Girard, were on the ticket. You could buy a ticket, but they never appeared on any of the timetables. As you can see, at Plank Road, it was just a intersection. And here, Norwalk. Now, I say you could buy a ticket for Hollywood, but it's, was never listed anywhere. And then this is the York station that was still standing. The building to the back was the warehouse. It was sold to York Housing Authority that operate out of this building now. Now I want to talk about some of the businesses. 3 of the large businesses: Maryland Marble, which was in Cardiff, that mined marble. And the marble, part of it is here in this building that I'm talking from. It was used in the Empire State Building and a couple of the congressional offices in Washington, and some of the main post offices used this green marble that were mined. There was only two places this green marble was mined. That was in Vermont and here and in Maryland. Staso Milling. They made the slate granules that were used. Their biggest customer was Mohawk Roofing, and the granules on their tiles, roofing tiles, is came from this location. They would ship 12 to 20 boxcars of this daily. Funkhauser, another large operator of slate products. Terrazzo, which are the slate chips, the slate roofing tiles, the stuff for the roofing slates. They ship 20 to 30 cars a day of this material. This is Redline Cabinet Company. There were 4 different operations in Redline. They made cabinets. They would send boxcar loads of television cabinets to Bendix in Towson for their Philips television sets. And they would send those all the time. Emmons Company bought control of the railroad in '73. And over the next 10 years, they created York Rail. They bought East Penn Railroad, which are both in Pennsylvania. The St. Lawrence and Atlantic Railroad, which was up in Maine, and the West Virginia Central Railroad. Now, eventually, all but York Rail were gotten rid of by the end of the century. In the '70s, they started building freight cars because you got a good amount of revenue for your freight cars on another railroad. So they built 4,000 of them. And so they made plenty of money on that. Now, these are some of the engines that were bought by Emmons in the 70s and 80s. 1500 is still operating on the railroad. 85 is gone. This is 1506. 1506 was a used engine that came from the Reading, and it is now back in the Reading Museum in Pennsylvania, back to its original number. And it was here's a couple. 1602 was another engine that was bought for York Rail. But what happened was in December 31st of 99, Emmons had sold the other railroads. They decided to merge York Rail and the Ma and Pa to form the York Railroad Company, which is now operating in the area. And York Railroad Company is now owned by Galician and Wyoming Rail Corporation, which does, they own like 60 small lines, regional railroads around the country. So that's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. And if there was any questions, if you're going through chat or I'll be glad to try and answer anybody's questions that they might have about the railroad. So turn it back to Chris.
Thank you so much, Walt. We did have a viewer make a comment that I think all of us could agree, telling us, I'll find it for you here in a minute, that they really enjoyed hearing the presentation and seeing all the old pictures.
Yeah.
E. Andrews said, nice to see the old Bel Air station again. Wish we could still hear the trains coming through town.
Yeah.
We do have another question. Where specifically in Delta was the slate quarry located?
What was the question?
The question was from Brad, and he's asking, where specifically in Delta, PA, was the slate quarries located?
Funkhauser, you have to go the main route through Delta 851 and go out Adam Road, Atomic Road. Some of the ruins are still there where Funkhausers were, but there, you have to realize there were 17 slate quarries in the Delta Whiteford area of Harford County. Staso in Whiteford, their quarry was on the east side of 136, and you'll see a road called Quarry Road. They had their own narrow gauge railroad that brought the slate from their quarry to their processing plant, which I showed the picture of, which was right on what is now Old Whiteford Road. So.
Okay. We have another question from Emily Kilby. When was the last passenger train from Bel Air to Baltimore? She said she shares with us that she was part of either a 4-H or a railway of a 4-H or Brownie excursion on that trail. So
yeah, they took Girl Scouts. They also took excursions with Boy Scouts that went to Baltimore and to the they went to the York Fair. They went to the fair in Timonium. They took people at different times, but the last passenger train to run was August 34th. Yeah, August 31st, 1954. The railroad announced in June, when they lost the post office contract, which was the 31st of August of 54, that passenger traffic would stop. And that summer, they had to rent extra passenger cars to carry people because people wanted to ride the train, and they had to rent 2 extra passenger cars that they could move people. The last train was pulled by engine 70 they used both gas electric 60 and 61, one baggage car 35, and a rented P-54 Pennsylvania coach to carry enough passengers. I have a friend, his parents put him on the train in York, and he rode to Bel Air, where his grandparents picked him up off the train to riding the last train.
Oh.
So the last train was from York to Baltimore. Okay.
Okay, we have a number of comments and questions for you, Walt. If you're willing to continue to answer
going.
them for us, great. Deb Rapisky says that there was ice harvesting in Bel Air, Maryland before refrigeration. I understand one along Ma and Pa Railroad Trail near the Harford Mall, and she's asking, did Ma and Pa ship the ice?
Most of the ice that was mined here in the Bel Air area was on the Kelly property. If you go down the Ma and Pa Trail, there's a stream that crosses from the right to the left at the bottom of the hill coming out of Bel Air. If you go back, you can see part of the little dam that was there to dam up the water that they would cut blocks of ice. Further down on the other side of Route 1 is another ice house, and they had the Kellys had one ice house down in the woods and one that the Indian exhibit now right below the house, which was the ice house, that they would store the ice. In Harford County, the main ice collection was along the Susquehanna River. They would, in the wintertime, the warehouses along there would cut the ice when the river was unfroze and the ships could come up. They would load them up and take them to Philadelphia, to New York, to Boston, loads of ice. And these same people that collected the ice in the wintertime, in the summertime, they were harvesting the shad fisheries. So, but, a few other farms probably around also would harvest ice, but the majority of the ice used came from the Susquehanna River. So.
Okay, we have a question from Mark Wolkow, and he's asking if you have an overview map.
Yes, we do. That will show coming out of Baltimore, going to York, and but I don't have it on this program or with me today to be able to show that. But if you go online to the Maryland and Pennsylvania Historical Society, there is a map there that you can see the entire location of the railroad.
Great. Jane is asking if the Forest Hill Station is a museum that one can visit.
It's not a museum. It's just it's a business, a store. Once the society opens again, just so people know, the Maryland and Pennsylvania Historical Society, we had our archives of the railroad. 4 or 5 different people had stuff in their homes. 90% of it we have moved into this building, and it will once the society opens up, it'll be here for people to come browse, look at, see the different things. Most of it has been digitized, so you can sit at a computer and look at all the different things that are there.
Great. Yeah, because that was what I was going to ask, how people could learn more, Walt, because so many people have sent in information saying how informative this has been and how much they've enjoyed it. So I'm sure
I have
more.
I
Yeah.
have written 6 books so far on the Mom and Pa. They're available through the Mom and Pa Historical Society. We do have we do get them here. I can get them and have them here for people to order them. Here at our society, we have done 5 different bulletins. Right now, I think the only one that's available is number 69. But they all give different information on the railroad. So
Great. That's wonderful. I'm sure people appreciate that, Walt. I have one more comment to share, and this might be of particular interest to Walt because you had said that your grandfather was a station master there.
yeah.
And Bob Tarring says that his great grandfather was a head conductor on the railroad and lived just behind the Bel Air station. James Smith from 1911 to 1912. So another person with personal connections to the Bel Air station has joined us today. And he also mentions that there's some restoration going on at the B&O station in Aberdeen.
Yes.
Now, so
yeah, we were this society, Harvard Historical. We had gotten the station from the B&O, and we arranged and everything to get the station moved away from the railroad tracks. And now we turned it over to a group in Aberdeen to do the final repairs to try and put that station back to some kind of operation. So our society was involved with that building. So also, you know, we have done other things such as the Justin House up in Dublin that was sitting at the golf course off of Tollgate Road. We helped in getting that dismantled, moved, and remantled. So that is something we, you know, it all depends on what kind of funds we get to be able to do things. And that's the one thing. We are a private entity. We don't really get any money from any of the governments in the county. It's all donations and membership fees that help us maintain and do what we love to do and keep history alive. So,
Walt, I have another question. They keep coming in.
okay.
Michael Dixon's thanking you for a great.
Mike Dixon.
Many people have been sending their thanks, but I'm just conveying the questions. Were the station agents also telegraph operators? And did messages for delivery or news come in by the telegraphers?
Most of the agents were also telegraph agents. I showed you the Yo station, and the agent there in the 1910 to 1930 era would hold classes every year for agents to teach them to operate telegraph. Um, you had Western Union. You had, which was one of the main telegraph operating companies. They did not operate on the railroad. They operated separate from the railroad. But telegraph messages were sent from station to station until the telephone brought into existence in probably the 20s to the 30s when the railroad started using telephones to transfer messages because a train may be operating under their standard orders coming out of whichever station, Baltimore or York. But if one would get delayed, they would had a meeting area that they were supposed to meet so that the trains could pass each other. So if one got delayed for whatever reason, they would send out a Form 31 or a Form 19. And so to catch the engines at the last station before wherever it is the meet would be, if they were changing it to someplace. So, originally it was telegraph between the stations. And once they got telephone service, and in the 50s, late 40s, one of our clients was Bendex. They started radio communications and they equipped our engines with radios so that instead of telephones or telegraph, they had radios that they could get messages on. So that's what happened with telegraph, what we know of it.
Well, you also mentioned that there was transporting of milk cans. Where was the milk being transported?
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
The railroad was also called the Milky Way because the Maryland Pennsylvania Road transported more milk to Baltimore than any other railroad. They brought in more than the B&O, more than the Western Maryland. They would pick it up along each station had milk platforms. And I showed you some that had the covering to keep the sun off the milk. So the train would pick up and bring the milk in the morning. The different creameries, and in the early years there in Baltimore, there were probably 30 different creameries that produced milk products. And they would have their wagons sitting there at the platform in Baltimore as they unloaded the cans to get their cans and take them back to their place to process. Now, the milk cans themselves, just so you know, there was a name of the railroad on a plate, the name of the farmer and station that he would bring his milk cans. And depending, there would also be a number at times. So you might have M&P RR Fallston, Dave Reed, can number 4, so that they could get that after they got the cans emptied from the creamery and cleaned and bring them back. They knew which railroad to bring them back to. The railroad knew which order to put the cans on the passenger train, because the passenger trains picked up the milk. And so they could deliver it back to the proper station. So that's what happened with it.
All right. Well, when you had such fabulous photographs. I mean, the photographs were as interesting and fascinating as the information you were giving. Were those photographs from your own collection, or how did you gather those images together?
Over the years, we've collected photographs and photographs and photographs. There are over 20,000 photographs we've collected. Personal photographs, such as nobody had seen the Bynum Station until I pulled out of my collection the photographs for Bynum that my great aunt had taken between 1900 and 1905. One gentleman I know of, his father in the 1890s took photographs. I had 2 photographs show up here one day from a lady, a great uncle in the well, the photographs he brought were from an accident in 1891 that he had taken with a and made the prints from glass plates that he had taken in 1881. And the thing is, a lot of people have brought us material, and sometimes they're looking at somebody, and you look at the background and you've got something entirely different, that's something you've been looking for. So it's fun. Things end up in the internet, so it's just fun watching and collecting. And we now have everybody has their smartphones and they can take photographs and videos, and they get posted on Facebook. So I'm on Facebook all the time and I'm downloading this stuff. Once in a while it's a new photograph, but of the things that are happening now, it's something for the future and to have it.
That's great. And people are continuing to share their memories of hearing mornings during their Andrew says during her childhood, she could listen to the sounds of her father lifting the heavy milk cans and onto the trucks, onto the platforms. So,
Yeah.
Well, you've really, I think, inspired people to think back and remember some wonderful things about the Ma and Pa, and personal recollections that people are sharing. You mentioned that you have written books on the Ma and Pa, and how can people get a hold of those books? Are they available?
We have my book on diesel engines here at the society. I've done one on the steam engines, the diesels, the freight cars, the passenger cars, forms that they that were used by the agents, and one that just came out in November was accidents, mishaps, and wrecks. So, and they're all in the 300 to 400 pages, a lot of color photographs, a lot of black and white photographs. They all run $30 to $40. You can ask for them here. I can get them from the Mom and Pa Historical Society. That I can bring them in, and then we can sell them from here.
Mm.
So all I have to do is which ones they want, and I'll arrange for it from there.
Great. So Walt, for the people that want to contact you and talk to you further, either about your books or other questions they have, can they reach you at the Historical Society? Is that the best thing to do?
Yes, they can contact here.
Mhm.
When we're open, I'm here a couple days a week. If I'm not here, the secretary here
Mhm.
can get their number and whatever, and then we'll make arrangements to make contact. But on the Historical Society's webpage, you can send in a request for information, and it will get forwarded to me, and then I can make contact and get answers.
Great. Thank you so much, Walt. And that web address you can see on the slide that is on the screen now is www.harfordhistory.org. We hope that you have enjoyed today's presentation on the Ma and Pa Railroad, 1909 to 1999. So much thanks to you, Walt, on behalf of everyone, all of our viewers today, and us at the Historical Society of Harford County. If you have enjoyed the presentation today, and it's clear that many of you have, please consider making a donation or becoming a member. You can do both of these things by visiting our website, which is again, www.harfordhistory.org. And you can see, as we have on the thank you slide, that there are also Harford historical bulletins available that, for instance, is the one we've listed here, cover the Ma and Pa Railroad. Bulletins are for sale also on our website, not just about the railroad, but about many different topics. So browse those selections and buy what applies. Our next virtual event will be on February 27th at 2 p.m. We'll be launching a new interview series called Oh, the Stories We Can Tell. The first interview in the series will be with Carol Dybel, who is a local planner, author, and historian. Carol will be joining us and sharing stories about the changes that took place during the 26 years that she served as Bel Air's planning director. She'll be showing photographs and tracing the transition that the town of Bel Air made from a rural county seat to bustling suburban hub that we have today. So join us for that interview on the 27th. It's a 1-hour event. It's free, and you can reserve your ticket again at www.harfordhistory.org. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.